Good morning, everyone. Good morning. My name is Stan DeJarnett. It's my honor to chair the State Board of Education this year. And I now call the February 2025 State Board of Education meeting of the Committee of the Whole to order. I'm now going to call on Martha Zoller to introduce our guest who will provide our inspiration along with a prayer and a pledge to the flag. Martha?
Thank you. Don't touch me, it says there. I grabbed it right away. Anyway, I want to thank everybody for being here today, and it is so great for me to be able to introduce my friend, Justin Giboney. Justin and I think it's fair to say, came to politics from different sides of the spectrum, but united in our love of Jesus Christ. And we also have gotten together to talk about issues, and he does a wonderful work with something called the AND campaign. And I'm sure that we all have had conversations with people where we've said, well, I might not see what you think, but this and that and the other thing. Well, a lot of times the conversation gets ended before you get to the but. But if you say to someone, we might not see eye to eye on something, and we can talk about this or that or the other thing, you find the common ground between people. Justin Giboney is a pastor. He's also a person that has been involved in the community. He has launched something that he's going to talk to us about today that has to do with civic engagement and literacy efforts that he is doing with the Atlanta Public Schools and his organization. He's brought a few folks with him that he will introduce, but right now I'd like to introduce to you my friend, Justin Giboney.
Thank you so much, Martha, for the kind words. Thank you, Chair, and to the board for having us today. I am here, I'm the president of the AND campaign, and I'm here with some of my friends from the AND campaign and some of our advisors and friends. Lance Cooper, Angel Maldonado, Sharday Orr, and Josh Clemens are all here and part of the initiative that I'll be talking about. But before we get to that, if you don't mind, I'd like to start with a prayer. Dear God, we come here, some of us sitting in seats of power with the influence to have an impact on these children, Lord. And we know that the children of Georgia need us, and they need us to come together, and they need us to make a real attempt to see eye to eye. That's what this whole project of democracy, this whole American project has been about. Can we come together for the good? So I pray that you lead us together. We know that you destroy the boundaries and the divisions between us, and we ask that you bring us together, if for no other purpose, to serve you and also to serve the children. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. Well, I don't think I have to tell any of you that not only in Georgia, but in our nation in general, we are extremely polarized. We're polarized along partisan lines. We're polarized along racial lines. And there may be merits or dismerits on both sides of the argument. But one thing that we should be able to come together about is children, especially when it comes to literacy. So I know that many of us know these statistics, that the kids in many of the areas of Georgia aren't at the place that they need to be when it comes to literacy. And I strongly believe, that the church is a very important mediating institution. And that instead of pointing fingers and saying it's this group's fault or that group's fault, the church can step in today and say, you know what, we're going to be a helping hand to educators, to boards like this, to get these kids to where they need to be. So the AND campaign with our initiative is we are trying to go beyond partisan boundaries, partisan divides. We're trying to go beyond racial divides and bring the church together to say we are going to get these children to where they need to be. I don't know how this country comes together or how we heal the divides if the divides in the church aren't healed. And so we want to do it. We want to provide some proof of concept that these things can happen. So we're creating the Civic Revival initiative to engage one another and say, hey, I don't care what party you're in. I don't care where you came from, even the differences that Martha mentioned between me and her. We share a faith, and we share we share the fact that we truly care about our neighbors and we truly care about these children. And so that's what we've all come together to say, that we are united even in our differences, beyond our differences, to take care of the children, especially when it comes to literacy, because their future depends on it and our future depends on it. If we would stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Pastor, if y'all aren't in too much of a hurry today, there's probably some other groups here in the close vicinity that I'd really like for them to hear your message as well. They're right across the street. So if you could just run by there on your way home, I know our children would all be better off for that. Thank you very much for bringing that today, and thank you for the folks you brought with you, and thank you for the work you're doing. Greatly appreciate it. We've got several guests here today. Some of them come individually, some of them come in groups. I'm going to do my best to pronounce everyone's name correctly, but I do want to recognize those of you that are joining us online. We have a big crowd today here in the boardroom. We do have a group from Okefenokee RESA. One of my favorite RESAs, I'm not going to lie, because they always treat people so well when you visit. Melissa Wilbanks, Superintendent in Atkinson County, would you wave? Just let us know you're here. Thank you for being here. Dara Bennett, Pierce County Superintendent of Schools. Tracy Martin, the Bacon County Superintendent of Schools. Iris Collins from Okefenokee RESA, the CFO. And Riverwatch Middle School Assistant Principal Ginger Brayo. Welcome, Ginger. We have some other students from Riverwatch Middle and their parents, I think, and I'm going to wait just a little bit to have them introduced because they're here for a very special reason, and we're going to give them a little extra time. But don't worry, we're not going to skip over you. I'm going to let the superintendent handle that. Also representing Sugar Hill Elementary is Principal Nick Boyers. Nick, thank you for being here. We have a science teacher, Michelle Rule from Sugar Hill Elementary as well. And then we have several people from, we head back to Okefenokee RESA. We have Brandon Carter, who's the Assistant Director. Morning, Brandon. My good friend Morris Lee, Superintendent in the Coffee County Schools. Josh Clemens, One Race Movement. Yes, Josh, you've already been around. And then our friends from the Georgia Partnership, who we're going to hear from later, Matthew Smith, and the President, Dana Rickman. Glad to have you with us. Robert Aycock from PAGE, the Professional Association of Georgia Educators. Annie Ginsterblum from the Georgia School Boards Association. Sharday Orr from the ANN Campaign. Now, of course, you've already heard from Justin Gibney, and also Lance Cooperate. Ben Wiggins from Gale. Good morning, Ben. Kim Morgan, Superintendent in Brantley County. One of the 4 finalists for Superintendent of the Year this year. Kim, congratulations on that honor. And also, she's a member of the Okefenokee family as well. J.D. Harden from Cognia. Morning, J.D. Lionel Brown. There you are. Welcome, Lionel. Greg Jacobs, who's the Executive Director at Okefenokee RESA. Lori James. And then we have a group of superintendents who are here as part of a leadership cohort that is authorized and sponsored by the Georgia School Superintendents Association. Some of them are with us this morning, and they were here with us yesterday, board members. Eric McPhee from Grady County, Nehemiah Cummings from Worth County, Brian Ridley from Gilbert County, our good friends from GSSA, Curtis Jones and Rob Brown, and also Mike Elton from Whitfield County. Is there anybody that slipped in other than DOE staff? Anybody that slipped in the back that didn't have a chance to sign in? Vicki, or where are you? There you are. Yeah, for Brooks County. I must have skipped your name, Vicki, but anyhow, I apologize. And Vicki and Morris and I were all superintendents together back in the day, and so it's great to see our veteran superintendents here as well. Anybody else?
Dr. Jarnick, can I mention Mr. Jonathan Judy, who's the Chief Information Officer for Tippah County?
Great, welcome. Glad to have you with us. Any other visitors? We have scheduled a public hearing this morning on the following items. Some state board rules that have been on the, out for public comment for the past 30 days. There are 4 of those rules, and we'll vote on them later today. One is the state board rule on regular, advance, and low wealth funding. Another is a state board rule, proposed state board rule on special appropriation for public school capital outlay. Another proposed state board rule for school size, and another for the Georgia Special Needs Scholarship Program to add a list of eligible recipients to that list. We did not have anyone sign up to speak on any of those rules. So at this time, I'll declare the public comment and public hearing session closed, and then we can move on. Now board members, we're gonna begin building the committee of the whole agenda. And as I call on each committee chair for a report, if you would please indicate which items are recommended for the consent agenda and which items, if any, will move forward for a separate vote or other action. I'll start with the executive session items. Mr. Donaldson.
Oh, I'm going first?
Yes.
Oh,
Just want to make sure, see if you're paying attention.
I wasn't. Okay, I'll make a recommendation to move the following to the consent agenda: the individual student waivers, the minutes of the January 14, 2025 executive session, the minutes of the January 2025 state board meeting, the February 2025 personnel report, and February 2025 legal report, with the exception of one legal appeal that is being pulled for a separate vote, 2025-10. All right.
So we'll pull 2025-10 for a separate vote. All the rest will be added to consent agenda.
That's correct.
Mr. Benton, the Budget Committee.
Yes, sir, I recommend that we move items 1 through 10 from the Budget Committee to the consent agenda.
All right, items 1 through 10. All right. Mr. Griffin, the Rules Committee agenda.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. We will move items 1 through 4 for separate vote. Items 5 through 9 to be placed upon the consent agenda.
1 through 4 for a separate vote. Those are the proposed rules.
Yes.
And then 5 through 9 for the consent agenda. All right, thank you very much. Ms. Zoller, the District Flexibility and Charter Schools Committee.
Yes, we recommend that we move items 1 and 2 to the consent agenda.
Thank you very much. Items 1 and 2. For those of you that join us frequently, this is a routine part of our work. For those of you that are new to this, our state statute requires that every item that is, particularly that is a board rule, be pulled for a separate vote so that our votes may be recorded. And as we're proposing some new state rules after they've been on the table for public comment for a month, that's the reason for that. It's not that they're controversial. It's not that we are going to have a long discussion. We had our discussion yesterday in committee meeting about these, but the law requires that we pull those for a separate vote. So that concludes the committee of the whole. While the staff is preparing the consent agenda and the final agenda for our action, I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Woods, who has some very special guests and a report to provide, and then I'll provide a report, and I have some guests here as well. So Superintendent Woods, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you. Again, we have a couple presentations today. We'll first start off with our cybersecurity student poster contest. So, of course, we know school safety is definitely on the docket and much of the news today. But school safety extends beyond just having an intruder into the classroom. Because we know and we have seen, the importance of cybersecurity and making sure that, we are very protective of the digital information that we engage with each and every day. So Dr. Osborne, I think this is under your purview, so I'm going to turn the program over to you.
Good morning, Superintendent Woods and Dr. Jarnett, members of the Board of Education. Thank you for allowing us a few minutes this morning to recognize some very, very important guests and their families as we recognize the winners of our second annual cybersecurity poster contest. Students, you are to be commended first for the time that each of you took to research a very, very important topic, that being cybersecurity, but then to use your talents and your creativity to capture on a poster the importance of good cybersecurity practices. Superintendent and board, we received well over 200 student posters that represented 24 organizations, which was double the number of entries which we had last year. So imagine our excitement whenever we received that number. You can also imagine that made it doubly hard for us to really begin to really discern which one of these were worthy of winners, because anybody that had a participant in that, you can imagine that they are worthy of representing what is, as you said, Superintendent, an incredibly important topic. So thank you so much. But also to the many teachers and to the schools and certainly our families and parents, because without you and without your support of our students, they may not have first known about this and secondarily made it here today and certainly had to have that representation inside of the contest. I'd like to point out that I'm joined here today with Mr. Nathan Miller. For you new board members, Nathan is our Chief Technology and Information Security Officer, and he's joined with Mr. Jonathan Judy, who is the Chief Information Officer for Tift County Schools, but also one of the founding members of GLET, which is the Georgia Leaders for Educational Technology. And it's through a collaborative process with both GLET and the Board of Education that we recognized exactly what you said, Superintendent, and that is the growing importance of cybersecurity. And in an effort to better understand how we can best address the needs of schools, we absolutely need advocates and the voices of our districts to be fully representative of that. And so it's through that partnership that we recognize that sometimes the student becomes the teacher. And so we listen to them and certainly recognizing them today and their fantastic work. And I think in just a few minutes, whenever you see the results of these students, that you'll join me in recognizing that these students are very, very worthwhile of the recognition that they have, or that they're going to receive, and certainly of the efforts. And so I'm going to turn it over to you, Mr. Miller, and to you, Mr. Judy, to award these to the students. So thank you. Students, I'm going to stand over here, and I think what we're going to do is Mr. Judy and Mr. Miller are going to recognize you. We're going to put your poster there. Mr. Jason over there is going to take your picture, and then come join me on that side, okay? And we're going to get a group poster when we're all said and done, okay? So thank you, board. Nathan.
Thank you, Dr. Osborne. Thank you, board, for the opportunity to have this presentation today. I would like to point out of all those 200 plus entries that we had, every one of our participants gets a certificate. As you can see here, these certificates are all hand signed by Superintendent Woods. So really thank you for the support. It's a very meaningful thing, even though it might not seem like much. That is a very awesome show of support. We also like to let everyone know that these posters will be going home with the students. So if you want to display those in your school, keep those in your bedroom, whatever you want to do with them. But we also have another one that we'll be keeping here at the office to display for the next year. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Judy, and once again, thank you to GLET and their team for the support.
Yeah, so thank you to Dr. Osborne and Mr. Miller. Last year, they approached us and said, hey, we want a partnership to support a contest for students to be involved with cybersecurity. Obviously, as the Chief Information Officer for Tift County Schools, I tell vendors all the time, we're in a unique situation. We're being attacked from the inside and the outside, right? I got my students trying to get out of my network and people trying to get in my network. So we're double fighting people. Home Depot doesn't have that problem. Their employees aren't trying to get out of their network. My students are always trying to get around ours. So we sit in a unique spot. So to educate our students on the risks, there were multiple topics they were able to choose from to do their posters. And my team, our GLET leadership team, scoured those 200 plus posters. And we chose the ones that we thought represented artistic creativity, the true nature of what we were wanting for educational purposes. And we were just, again, thrilled at the turnout. We hope we double it next year. We may have to get some high school interns to help us judge next year if we get 400. So, but every student will get a Amazon gift card and then a subscription to Kiwi Labs, which is a STEM activity that is provided by GLET. Just a quick GLET plug. We are also going to be very cyber focused for our future. Next month in March, on March 17th, we have actually rented out State Farm Arena, Mercedes-Benz Stadium, and we're going to have the first ever CyberCon for Georgia Educational Leadership. So K-12 and higher ed districts across the state are going to come to Mercedes-Benz Stadium, and we have some of the best vendors in the country coming to tell all of our school systems about best practices for cyber. So it's going to be a great event. So, but without further ado, you go announce names or am I announcing names?
You announce names now.
All right. So first up, from Sugar Hill Elementary School, Anisha Taran.
If you don't mind, could you raise the poster up? so we can see it?
Some of these are absolutely amazing. All of them.
Next up, from Riverwatch Middle School, Samdesh Thurukral. From Shiloh High School, Shania Bowery. And this is one of my favorites too. You're very talented. So.
Oh, wow.
Very good.
Did I hear right, that one was actually a winner from last year? Correct.
Yeah, you got to stand in front of it.
I think that's weird.
We got two more.
All right. From Georgia Academy for the Blind, Gazelle Prado Gotti. Bell.
Turn in this direction, and 3, 2, 1. Thank you.
And our last winner for today, from Heritage Academy Homeschool, Zoe Broussard. Not sure if Zoe made it, but we will get her stuff to her, and that is her poster, another great.
Zoe won last year too. She's actually published she published a book, graphic novels.
Sure we do.
Yes, we
We
do.
do.
I think
It's like the best part of it.
basically that we're gonna get a picture together, so.
We can have the board members stand here. And we'll have the students in front of you.
Right.
Told you that.
I know. After you, sir.
If you're vertically perfect, you need to be in front.
As a group, if you'll step forward a little bit to get in front of the table.
Congratulations. Great job.
You will get a little further back.
Oh, yeah, here we go.
And then everybody looking here. And sir, here with the cell phone, I've actually got your cell phone. And then looking here, 3, 2, 1. Thank you. A few other photos.
Congratulations. Good job. Congratulations.
Great job.
I'm not gonna lie to you, the block.
Yeah, he's gone.
While we're waiting for the final agenda to be published, we're gonna take just a tiny break. This will give you a chance, board members, a chance to visit with the folks in the audience. And candidly, you parents and students, if you're, because we've already done the high point of our meeting. This has been the best part. The rest of it's pretty pro forma, so but it'll give you a chance to slip out if you like. But we'll go into recess for just a couple of minutes till we have our agenda ready, okay?
So I planned on already being out of the building, letting y'all continue your work, but we had our final winner enter, so we wanted to go ahead and honor Miss Zoe Broussard from Heritage Academy Homeschool, her first place finish. 2 years in a row, very talented artist. Very lucky to have her in the state of Georgia doing this work. So Zoe, we appreciate you.
Three, two, one.
Board member, well, new board member. We're gonna get to enjoy these posters. They'll be out in the hall for the rest of the year. We'll get to look at them on a regular basis. So, thanks Superintendent Woods. Anything else?
Got one more. Of course, I know this is gonna be a tough act to follow. But if anybody can pull it off, will be our next presenter. This week at the Capitol, we actually had a press event, and, talking about, teacher recruitment and retention, which we know it, continues to be an issue, not only within Georgia, but throughout the U.S. Kind of learning that right now that about a third of our workforce has 21 years or more in service. So you can start doing the math of trying to figure out, in the next 10 years, we've got to have people to come in. And, and I think it's so important we look at doing this. But one of my favorite teachers, again, of course, this is not a stranger to us, Ms. Christy Todd, who, of course, was our previous Teacher of the Year, top 4 finalists for the nation. To me, she was the finalist, but, that's a little biased, so, for what it's worth. But she has headed an initiative in here as far as looking at the Department of Education. She now works with us on staff and has really taken this really by the horns and really just running off with it. And so, Christy, I'm gonna let you come up, not take your thunder, but this new initiative, Teaching the Peach, is something that we are looking at. And, we had a great start, great turnout, and we're looking forward to really getting a lot of great people to come into the profession in the days to come. So, Christy, take it away.
Good morning. Thank you, Superintendent Woods, for that introduction. And I heard y'all were down a teacher today. So we had to make sure that we had some representation in the house, right? Holly's been doing a wonderful job. I know that y'all are proud of her. I'm so proud to watch all she's done as well. So thank you, Superintendent Woods, for the opportunity to speak today and for the opportunity to do this work. Thank you to the board for allowing me to do this work as well. And I'm excited to share about 2 initiatives that are going around teacher recruitment and retention. So Tuesday afternoon, Superintendent Woods announced the Department of Education's brand new teacher recruitment campaign at the Capitol, and it's called Teach in the Peach. So you all have brochures at your seat, and for our visitors that are here today, there's many out in the hallway, so take as much as you can. And our goal was really to make the teaching profession accessible to your neighbor. And for me, this is personal. My neighbor right next door to me, he is retired military, and he was talking to me about wanting to be a teacher. And he sent off his resume to a recruiter at an HR department and talked to me about he never got a call back, and he didn't understand why people didn't want him to teach. And so we had to talk about the difference between what a recruiter does in the private sector and what a recruiter might be able to do at a school system, right, with limited capacity. And so just helping to think about the language we use and how we can break down barriers to make it accessible for people who may have that internal pull to be a teacher, but they don't know how. So when we first started this project, and this work has really been going on for several years, long before I was in this role, And huge shout out to April Aldridge and our teaching and learning department for really looking at teacher recruitment, retention, and recognition, and how we can support teachers. And so when we started building this site, we decided first we needed to define the end user. Who are the profiles of people who could be a teacher? So we did over 50 interviews with people who want to be a teacher that currently aren't, to identify what the barriers were they were facing. We talked to high school education pathway students, college education students, military families, paraprofessionals, adults wanting to change careers, retired, and teachers, and then teachers who've been out of the workforce for a little while. Maybe they stayed home to raise a family, they want to return to work, and also out-of-state and international teachers. We even talked to a teacher in Alaska who was looking to move to a different state that had better retirement benefits. This site is truly built by teachers for future teachers. And why is that important? We know that people become a teacher because of another teacher, period. Like when you ask a teacher, why did you decide to be a teacher? They name another teacher. So we need to use our teachers. They are the best recruiters that we have. So we had a think tank of over 85 current Georgia teachers who contributed content for this site. They include teachers on our Teacher Policy Fellowship, our Advisory Council, and they represent rural, urban, and suburban teachers. You will see those voices woven throughout the site. And we were really careful about making sure that we were looking at new induction teachers, mid-career, and veteran teachers to get different perspectives. And then we also received feedback from Department of Education and other partners with over 100 experts involved in reviewing the site before its launch. It include our Godot teams in TNL, technology, CTAE, our rural department, and our communications teams. We reached out to district superintendents, their HR and recruitment staff. We worked with professional teacher associations, colleges of education, and education as a profession and early childhood teachers. We also partnered with a lot of our RESAs as well to get some feedback. In all, we had over 250 people that were involved in building the site that launched this week. So we're going to show you a couple of screenshots. This is the home page, which opens with a beautiful video. All the footage that you see, they're real Georgia teachers in real Georgia classrooms. And Megan, your team did a phenomenal job. This was not outsourced, it was done by our Godot staff, all the footage, so it's really beautiful. The site is laid out with 5 main pages. So we've got our home page, our teach page, which focuses on why you should be a teacher. And that page wasn't originally planned for the site, believe it or not. But that was something that we kept getting feedback on. I'm not sold on this is the job for me. I need to know more about what it is actually before I can even think about how I'm going to find my pathway. The plan page has our profiles for to the classroom, our pathways. Find is finding a job. Grow talks about the support a teacher receives in Georgia throughout their career. And Live highlights the benefits of why you should live and teach in Georgia. So we talked about teacher voices throughout the site, and we talk about the influence of a teacher. So these are real Georgia teachers, and you can hear their stories. Up in the top left corner is Bob. He was an aviation engineer that is now a CTAE teacher. Down in the lower right, that's Nathan, and he went through TAP to become a teacher. He's a fine arts teacher. And then on the left is Jeevney, and she is a scientist who was a stay-at-home mom, wanted to work at the school where her kids are. She's now a parapro that's pursuing teaching certification. So you get to see Georgia teachers and the different pathways they've taken to the classroom. We have a benefits and incentives page that breaks down, if you are a teacher in Georgia, you can retire as a millionaire because of our pension plan. And then we also show how to calculate your salaries. It goes into our state health benefit plans. And one of my favorite pages is the tax credits, grants, and loan forgiveness. It's a one-stop shop where you can see financial incentives, but it also lists all recent legislation created under the Gold Dome that supports teachers. So it's a great resource for everyone looking for that information. On the Teach page, you can see a day in the life of some of our teachers, like Daisha, and she talks about from opening the car doors in the morning to getting students home on the bus in the afternoon, what her day looks like. You even can take a pop quiz to find out if teaching is the right profession for you. And spoiler alert, we're not going to tell anybody no, okay? But if you tell us you don't like working with kids, we're going to recommend that maybe you should volunteer in your community with youth and teens to see if this is the right fit for you. So we have 10 potential pathways. So users go to the site, they pick the pathway that closely aligns, and then there's an anchor question that gives customized responses. So if you are an adult changing careers, the very first question you're going to have is, do you have a college degree? And so it's no, 2-year, 4-year, and based on your response, and you get customized options of pathways that you can come to the classroom. And we link to resources from our friends at the PSC and other entities as well to put it all in one place. This is one of my favorite parts of the site. It's the Find a Job map. So in addition to the wonderful search of Teach Georgia, which is linked on this site, we also have built out a map where you can click on the county. It takes you to the district HR site for every single school district in that county. It has an overlay with our military bases, our state schools, and our virtual schools. So that way, if you're military moving in, you know where your base is, but maybe you're not familiar with the school districts that are around you regionally, you can find that on this map. There's also a news feature. So I know we've got a lot of superintendents and RESA representation in the room. So you will be able to submit news and calendar items that are unique to your district. So you can see some that are already preloaded. We have news from Muskogee and Lanier County schools about things they're doing to support teacher recruitment and retention. And at the footer of the page, there's a place for district resources where they'll have a login, districts and RESAs to submit news, submit an event, and also marketing materials. So we're giving districts access to our bank of materials. So that's brochures that they can print, cards, it's videos that can be played at recruitment fairs. In addition, there's even a customizable template where you can promote your district alongside the Teach and the Peach resources. This would not be possible without sponsorship, and we're very grateful to have some sponsors already joining us in this work. Shameless plug, if you know somebody who may be interested in supporting our state's teacher recruitment and retention efforts, please put them in touch with me, and we'd love to talk to them about an opportunity to sponsor this work. And another thing that we announced is a statewide educator signing day. So this is Teach and the Peach's first sort of signature event, and it's really building on the work that has already been being done by our CTAE department and our local districts who are having signing days, but now we're having our first statewide signing day. It is fully sponsored by the College Football Playoff Foundation. It is going to be held on May 6th at the College Football Hall of Fame. And we're going to have multiple events. So in addition to having the Atlanta event, districts, if you already have a signing day, you can register your signing day, which is then as an official satellite location, which will then open up opportunities for free swag that the College Football Foundation is providing, in addition to educator signing bonus scholarships. So we're very excited about honoring some people who are signing to become an educator. And this is more than just high school students. It's college students, it's we have paraprofessionals, we have substitute teachers, military, adults changing careers. We want to highlight all of the different ways people can come to the classroom. So be on the lookout for more information. We'll have a keynote signing ceremony, food, swag bags, and we mentioned the scholarships. So information will go out hopefully next week to districts on how you can reserve a spot. And we'll be working with our RESA partners as well to identify different pipelines that we can highlight. So one thing, because I know this is state board and you guys love data, right? You love numbers. So I wanted to tell you a couple of things that have happened in under 48 hours since the launch. We have had 9.6 thousand page views of the site. We've had 3,000 unique site visitors, which is awesome because that means they're digging into more than just the homepage. We've had 5.5 thousand views of our commercial promoting this on social media. But the number I'm most excited about is we've had over 60 direct contacts of people who want to be a teacher and need help knowing how. And so here are just two quick stories that we've received. I have an associate's degree. I'm a 32-year executive in retail, running $4 billion business units with extensive experience teaching adults. I want to be a teacher. What do I need to do to start down this new path? The next one is a parapro from New York. I currently work in District 75 in special education. I have 25 years experience as a paraprofessional, and I want to be a Georgia teacher. What do I need to do to relocate? So these are the stories and the people we're reaching. And I just want to thank y'all for promoting the teaching profession and making it a great place to teach. Thank you.
Actually, I think this is really cool, but I want to ask, my daughter just graduated from college in last May, from an out-of-state school, and she majored in elementary education. She was in an out-of-state school, and their program obviously geared her to getting a license and everything in North Carolina, which is totally understandable. She didn't want to stay in North Carolina, she wanted to come back to Georgia. Full disclosure, she actually has ended up in Korea. She's teaching English there, but she ultimately will come back here to teach. She found it, hard to find jobs without like literally going through every single county and not even really knowing for sure. And the licensing issue, because before she ended up in Korea, she was looking for a job here. So she actually found it really hard to figure out. And I looked at this and I'm like, I'm hoping that this really is going to help navigate that sort of just technical part of it, how to get your license and that part. Does it do that?
Yeah, so she could go to the out-of-state teacher's profile page and it would talk about where she did her student teaching and connect her with the PSC to look at reciprocity for coming from an out-of-state to in the state of Georgia. But one thing I'm really excited about in phase 2, which I think would be really helpful for her, is that the profile pages of the 10, we're identifying teachers in Georgia who fit those 10 profile pages, and they are going to have a video that talks about exactly what you're talking about, where they struggled, how they worked through it, tips and hints to help them, and then working on having ambassadors that are in each of those profile areas as well that are then a resource for people like your daughter. So I'd love, right now, this site is organic. It's going to continue to evolve and change based on the needs of our end users and the needs that our partners identify. So ask her to look at the site, and if something's confusing, reach out because we can work on that.
She's
right
in
now.
Korea. I texted it to her. She'll
Perfect.
see
That's
when
awesome.
She wakes up.
That's awesome.
But,
So that was the one. When I looked at the map, we had some we got Germany, we got Italy, we got a Korea. So I guess she's already looked at it then.
I mean, she will ultimately come back here, but I just wanted to say that it wasn't. This was for somebody who knew she wanted to be a teacher and has done everything she could to be a teacher and still found it a little cumbersome to work through the process.
I'd love to talk to her more about her experience and how we can improve it.
So, do you feel like we have action, because we've talked for a long time about making it easier for people to make the transition into teaching, whether it's out of the military, like the example that you gave, or other areas where people have had experience working in the workforce. And I hear a lot of talk about it and I see things about it, but do you think that we actually are making it easier for people to make this transition, or are we just making it more complicated and more things to click on?
Yeah.
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
And I think that we've had some progress over the last couple of days, and I would urge y'all to, not last couple of days, last couple of years, I would urge you guys to look at the page on the site that talks about tax credits, grants, loan forgiveness, incentives to go into the profession, recent legislation. But I think there's more that we can still do. right? There's more identifying those barriers and figuring out ways to remove them to make it easier to get to the classroom. And my hope is that this site is the beginning of more collaborative work that could happen.
I mean, it was funny because my cousin was a 30-year retired Army colonel, okay, and he did hospital administration when he was in the Army, but he didn't want to do that when he got out in the private sector. He retired in New Jersey, okay, and so it's much easier that basically he went right into a position as an assistant principal in middle school. What better thing, a 30-year Army colonel, you know, being an assistant principal. But it was a very easy transition. And I don't know what they do in New Jersey that's different than what we do here. But I do still think there's a long way we can go to be able to translate the kind of experience that people get in the private sector, to be able to make it easy. I mean, I realize you don't want to lower standards on teachers. You don't want to not have great teachers, but you also need to be not so bogged down in the bureaucracy that you miss opportunities for people that have had great success in the private sector. Not unlike what we do with CTAE programs where we include people like that, and it seems a little easier to do it there. But it's just something that's always on the forefront of my mind.
Well, and I think you bring up a good point, and we're currently in a revision process right now with HR directors, rural, urban, suburban, and military communities. And our HR directors in military communities have been great resources because they talk about strategies that they can get people in. So whether it's starting out as a paraprofessional or a substitute teacher, different types of certificates and opportunities. I had a conversation with one yesterday that was just talking about how hard it is to find JROTC teachers, right? And so that's a great place to get them in. So really trying to identify those different paths and map them out just to have conversations for different, not only for prospective teachers, but for districts. What we're doing is we're building a playbook of best practices, right? And that other districts can learn from each other on how they're filling those gaps. So I think that will help as well.
Thank you.
I just played with your website a little bit. It's really impressive. And I went through, I'm a former teacher, and I went through it as if it's very clear. It's just very easy to navigate. So I'm really impressed.
Thank you for that feedback. Thank you.
I'm curious, piggyback on some of the license questions. Are you working with PSC on some of these questions that people have? Because, you know, those are really questions for the PSC, not really so much for us.
Right.
But what are we doing to work with them on that out-of-state teacher piece?
So I'm excited to continue partnering with them. I see my friend Jody Barrow in the back, and we go way back. And so I'm excited about the opportunities, the additional conversations that will open up around this, cross-departmental work as well. But really, when we built this site, the focus of this site wasn't necessarily, what resources already exist that we already have. It was really, what do people need? Grassroots level, what do people need? And so from now that we're identifying the need, we're identifying the barriers, working cross-departmentally, private, public partners to identify those needs and barriers, we're excited to do that work. And I know that we have, you guys have a recruitment summit coming up soon that a lot of the Godot staff is going to be attending as well. So that partnership is definitely continuing and deepening.
Great. Thank you.
Awesome.
Any other questions for Christy? While you mentioned Dr. Barrow, he thought he could slip in here without being introduced, but new board members and all of you veterans probably know Dr. Barrow very well. He was Christy's superintendent when she was in Fayette County, and then he went to work after retirement with the School Superintendents Association. In January, he became the executive director or the executive secretary of the Georgia Professional Standards Commission. That's the PSC that Matt referred to, which is the licensing and credentialing and professional development agency here at the state that works with this. Dr. Barrow, we may invite you back sometime this spring and give us an update on the state of the profession in terms of how many folks do we have out there and vacancies and maybe some answers to some of the questions that have been asked today.
I heard a lot. I wanted to jump up, Dr. DeJarnett, and just start answering questions. Ms. Zoller, we actually have some dedicated staff that are recruiting at military bases. 5 out of the 7 military bases here in Georgia, we actively go out and see that. A lot of questions, and hopefully we'll bring some innovation with regard to we want the process to be easy. We want our standards to maintain the high standards. And I can share, I know in talking with Christy, the first thing I did when I came back after the press conference is said, we're gonna put this new link on the PSC website in a very prominent place so people can see there's a good connection. I spoke to Dr. Jones's group yesterday. They hadn't heard about it. I said, go to the link, ask them, they'll tell you. So we're gonna work together and partner together in a lot of different ways. So I look forward to doing that. Superintendent Woods, look forward to our partnership even closer than it has been in the past.
Thank you. Superintendent?
I keep trying to trip it up, and it still keeps telling me things I can teach.
Well, again, thank you, Christy. Like I said, definitely the right person for the right job, as you can see, and, you know, leadership and everything that counts. Just to be aware of some things that we know we're trying to push across the street. You know, looking at our step rates. I'm a firm believer that, you know, our pay raises shouldn't stop at 21 years. But if we want to keep and encourage our young people to stay into this profession, then it needs to go up. And so that's one of our initiatives that we have. You know, as we look at, you know, allowing our people to come in, you know, give them, instead of 3, have 5 personal days. You know, like I said, trying to treat the professionals as they are. A lot of things, like I said, nobody really understands what goes on in a classroom, but it is a heavy, heavy lift, and especially at this day and time. So some things we continue to work across the street to advocate what's there. As Dr. Barrell, you know, mentioned, yeah, we can do a lot better collaboration, and we need to, because like I said, we've got to have these young people, these teachers, they are our best PR, and that goes without saying. It's easy for me to go out and about, but if I have a teacher sharing positive news with another person, then that's going to attract. If we have teachers that are sharing positive and being great role models and encouraging our young people to go in, that's what we want to see. And, you know, I think we're taking some amazing steps with that. You know, if I had to throw out something too, if I had a wish list, you know, I would say that anyone that's a classroom teacher and some of our support people, they need to be tax exempt from Georgia taxes. You know, that would be something I would look at, because, you know, one of the things we face now is that our teachers are having a hard time with housing. And that's an issue. That now I'm hearing across the state, I can't teach in the county that I live in because taxes, or I just can't afford a house. So there are some things that I think we could look at, you know, to really make this sound and encourage our young people to get in. So again, we look forward. Your feedback is essential. Hopefully you will save the date, May 6th, and be with us. You know, because like I said, I'm an old coach. And we love to have signing days, and we need to make sure we are celebrating these people, because like I said, sports is just kind of a short, you know, brief thing. But we're looking at 30 years of experience, and I guarantee you, there's going to be a lot of young people that roll in a classroom each and every year that these individuals are going to have an impact on. And I know Christy, you know, in her thing last year, as teacher of the year, talking, you want to see an influencer, see a teacher. So, you know, appreciate that. Again, I want to just apologize. I'm going to have to step out for a minute. I've got to go visit some young people. They're going to be talking with the space station and astronauts. And so I hated to pass that one up. So my wife will not let me go in space, so this is about as close as I get. So, with that. But again, appreciate that. Thank you for your work. We look forward to the days ahead. Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it. It's time for the chair's report, and we are very fortunate to have some representatives from the Georgia Partnership for Excellence in Education here today. Our friends, Dr. Dana Rickman and her colleague Matthew Smith, and I'm going to ask them to come to the podium.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you to the chair and to the board for allowing us to come and speak with you today. But just real quick, I wanted to say, Christy, this was a fantastic presentation and it's a great website, and I was playing with it while you were talking, and it was such a great website that I was like, maybe I'd be one of those mid-career changers. And so I was looking through what I had to do, and then I took the pop quiz that you were talking about, and it suggested that I focus on building key teaching skills like patience, creativity, or the ability and it said I should consider ways to improve my communication and problem-solving skills with children and teens, the volunteering, mentorship, or substitute teaching before I take such an important career step. So I'm going to stick with my day job, which is supporting those who do have the patience, creativity, and talent to do that. And I work for the children, not so much with them, as my role as president of the Georgia Partnership for Excellence in Education. Many of you, all of you will see that we handed out a folder during the break. So for longtime listeners and fans, you'll see our top 10 issues to watch is in there. You may already have a copy, but then we also included some handouts about the CARES impact study that we're going to be talking about today. The chairman invited me, and also just one more thing, I'm not taking it personally, Stan, that you told all the guests that they could go home now because all the interesting stuff was done. So hopefully this will be at least interesting for the board. But what we wanted to do today, Matt and I, was have an overview discussion of our top 10 issues to watch. We pull a policy committee together in the fall that's very diverse. Many of you in the room are part of that, to really look at and think about what are the top 10 issues going to be in the coming year. And the book is released the Friday before legislative session starts in January. And the way that it's put together is we look at any current research that comes out, what are people talking about on the national scene, what are some big things happening within Georgia, rolling out a new program, what do we think the legislature might do. Whenever we try that, we're always wrong, but we do our best. But then we also try and elevate some issues that we think should get a lot of attention that are not. And so the purpose of the top 10 is to really inform all stakeholders in Georgia, not just educators, about what's happening in education, and hope as a simplistic way as we can with these complex issues to give advice and guidance around what the research says to really move our state forward. And then when we're done briefly on the top 10, I wanted to give you an update on our CARES impact study. As many of you know, funded by the Georgia Department of Education, our CARES impact study is a multi-year, multi-strand research project that is now in the ending year, that we were looking to capture the district's uses of their ESSER federal relief funds. And with this study, we've released a series of reports over the past 3 years, really looking at how do we support effective practices and policies at the school, district, and state level to really help guide how districts are moving and unfold their activities moving forward. There were two main goals of the study: understand how the districts use these federal relief funds and what impact they may have had, though I want to be clear, this was not a formal evaluation. We didn't have those kinds of resources, but more just a reporting of what happened in the context in which they were making decisions and how they arrived at what they decided to do. But then also we wanted to identify, to the extent we could, best practices, though they haven't been going for a long time, but looked like promising practices of things that were working and innovations that were happening at the district level around student support strategies deployed by the districts, which can be shared and used with other practitioners and whatnot. And so to that end today, one of our more recent studies we released in November was a district case study on how 3 districts were implementing literacy reforms. And then we also released a 3-year update in December, and so you have the executive summaries from both of those in your packet. But for now, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Matt Smith, who's the primary author of our top 10 issues, to do a quick briefing on the top 10 and just sort of highlight a couple that really support what you guys are trying to do.
Yeah, so Dana covered a lot of this, but before we get started in the top 10, we wanted to kind of dive into the role that the partnership fills in our ecosystem. One thing that we do is we inform and influence leaders by giving presentations like this one. We also are really helpful if y'all have questions or problems of practice for us to come in and provide some leadership there and to give you insights around research and policy recommendations and data. And then the final thing is around being a catalyst, empowering all forms of leaders, not just state board members, but community leaders especially, to kind of take this mantle up and run with it. So, like you said, longtime listeners of the partnership, you know that last year in the 2024 Top 10 Issues, we focused on the effect of political polarization and people kind of feeling like they're, within their own tribe and not really collaborating together in community. And this year, we found, based on the really good feedback from that we wanted to kind of look at it from a slightly different lens, which was that how can we empower people to rediscover what public education looks like, how our school districts can be responsive to community needs, to student needs, to educator needs, but also being able to tell the story and empowering even those school leaders to say, this is what we're doing, and being really transparent about that so there isn't this feeling that something's going on that we don't understand. The kind of the focus of our discussion today, though, is this middle section. For the first time, we're focusing on kind of a chapter or a theme, and we have 3 issues that embody that theme. And so this is what we call the recipe for deeper learning. And these are the ingredients. Student attendance. It's important, obviously, that students are attending regularly. Student agency, and we'll kind of dive into that one actually the most of any of these 3 issues today, because it's important that students are engaged, motivated, and that teachers model a love of learning for students so that they can then run with that and feel optimistic about their future, but also prepared for it as well. And then we've heard a lot from Christy Day and other speakers around quality teaching and how teachers can really spearhead this transition to deeper learning. Of course, later in our presentation, we'll define what deeper learning is too, because that's obviously essential to be able to comprehend what our recommendations are for these 3 issues. The next 3 we're talking about from a standpoint of reconfiguring our state systems, and usually what we've done for the last 2 or 3 issues is focus on one area of the pipeline for each issue. And so we focused on early learning, where we're thinking about how we can create a statewide child development strategy, really focused on birth to 8, but also all school-age children. And then a little bit of the, I would say the sibling of issues 2 through 4, which is more around district and school leadership, but how do we tailor our school staffing in the building to make sure that we're meeting the student, teacher, and community needs. And then, as I said, then we kind of segue into post-secondary workforce development. We talk about some of the non-traditional routes to work readiness that allow some of our folks that may be affected by some of these economic headwinds, AI, machine learning, automation. How can we make sure that they are able to re-enter the workforce and participate in the economic prosperity of our state? The final issues, and this is one that you'll see issue 9 here too if you're looking at the slide, artificial intelligence. I've given this presentation at least 10 times in the last 6 weeks, and that's the one where I said, I'm going to focus on deeper learning. They were like, no, you're going to focus on AI. But anyway, if y'all have questions about that, we can do that. But that's definitely the issue that people seem to be really drawn to, similar to what we had last year where we talked about district superintendents and how we could support them. Even though it was kind of seen as the wild card issue, that's what was drawing most eyes, I think, to our issues. So today, just to recap, we're going to be focusing on issues 2, 3, and 4, and then that'll help us set the kind of set the stage for issue 10, where we talk about a new mindset for how we can invest in Georgia's future. So like I said, I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you what deeper learning is. We kind of contrast in terms of instruction the difference between surface learning and deeper learning. And so like, for instance, a lot of research we talk about, okay, well, what happens with like worksheets or whatever? You know, we give worksheets and then they complete them and they're closed-ended, and then they complete them, they turn it in, they get a grade, we move on. Well, with deeper learning, it's around problems, it's around projects, it's around open-endedness, it's about critical thinking, it's about collaboration, it's about teamwork, all those employability skills that our employers and our big Fortune 500 companies in Georgia are saying that some of their new hires lack. And so we're trying to figure out how we can then promote deeper learning, not just as a means to an end for that, but to get students really excited about careers and to be exploring those, because we found in the research that when they're engaged, they're more likely to do that independent learning, that independent exploration. So again, as I mentioned, one of the things that we're doing in terms of policy recommendations is defining what attendance looks like. The research is really clear that when students attend more than 90% of school days during the year, they're more likely to read on a grade level by the end of third grade. They're more likely to graduate high school ready for post-secondary options. And they're also more likely to be ready, and this is really important for our workforce, those students that want to enter STEM fields, they're more likely to be prepared if they are attending and feel engaged in the work. Over the last 2 years, the Walton Family Foundation has partnered with Gallup to measure student motivations. And one thing that they found is that they asked students to report how engaged they feel about their curriculum and their leaders in the school, the teachers that are teaching them. And we found that those that were the highest quartile, the people that feel most highly motivated, were 4 times more likely to be optimistic about their future and 10 times more likely to be prepared for college or for a post-secondary opportunity, whether it be a college, technical college, a apprenticeship, any of those things. So, like I said, I was going to really home in on student motivation, and I already mentioned kind of that first bullet. It's really important because what we're trying to do is model not just academic mindsets, but how can we model social and emotional parts of learning, because learning is fundamentally a social exchange between students to other students, from teachers to students, parents to their children. And so what's really important is that we honor that and figure out ways that we can, when we think about deeper learning, make sure that those models are part of professional learning, that they're part of the instruction, so that we understand that we're not necessarily just saying, here's a project and then you present it, but there's feedback that students are getting from their peers and from teachers. And so it's not that that's difficult, but it's not easy either. And so we have to figure out how we can have the scaffolding and state policy to make sure that students are more motivated and prepared. So how can we address student engagement? So I think that some of the things that we illustrated in the issue 3 of the top 10 is that what formats and student support strategies support engagement. Part of it's curriculum, but a lot of it's wraparound services, meeting the basic needs of students. And so there are a lot of different approaches. And so what we really advocate for is an idea of how can communities and schools come together to create that kind of whole school, whole community mentality around the whole child. And so I know that the Georgia Department's really focused on that lately. We've been working closely with Deputy Superintendent Justin Hill to talk about and amplify some of these things around student well-being and how that supports student success. Also, I want to draw your attention to how we can talk about adapting existing investments and strategies to align with deeper learning principles. We have existing assets here. We have a deeper learning network that the Georgia Partnership's part of, as well as let's see, the Georgia Leadership and Super School Improvement, and there are districts that are signed on for that too. And so we're excited about that. But how can we translate that into how we adapt our strategies and our investments? And then that would segue into issue 10, which is how do we adopt a future-oriented vision where we're thinking about our interests in terms of the dividends and our return on investment, which is the student, that human capital, instead of saying, how much does professional learning cost? How much are we paying teachers? How much are we supporting school leaders? Those are all important, but we need to think about it in terms of a comprehensive investment instead of just, kind of line items in a budget. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Dina.
And so to make it not quite such an abrupt transition, what issue 10 really looks at is being able to sort of evaluate and have accountability. And I mean accountability, don't freak out everybody, not in the federal standards of accountability way, but thinking about the data we have tied to the investments that we're doing, really able to evaluate at the local level what is working, what kind of programs are working? Is this reading program versus this reading program that has different costs, what kind of outcomes are we getting? Is the higher cost one actually delivering that much more impact? Things of that nature. And so from a state policy level, both Matt and I in the partnership, we agree that so much innovation is happening at the district level that local control is really important here, but there are state policies that can sort of scaffold and help the locals do what they need to do in terms of innovation and experimenting. And so things like a strong data structure to help locals evaluate and course correct and double down on things so that they know what's working, what's not working, things of that nature. That's a really important piece that we need to understand and how we try to move all this forward and foster a different way of educating our children so that they remain engaged, but also a different way of training our teachers so they have the training that they need and the effective training and resources and support. There are state structures around that can support that allow a lot more flexibility for the local districts and oddly enough, more autonomy to really create something new and different. An example of what we're just sort of trying to raise up here is in our literacy case study that we did is really looking at 3 different examples of innovation that have some core components that are similar. And so again, as part of the CARES impact study, what we did is we did a deep dive case study looking into 3 districts that were implementing literacy reforms. And I'm on the wrong slide. Here we go. And from there, you can see that we looked at Fulton County, we looked at Grady County. We have Dr. Maffei here. He could talk about his successes, and Marietta City, how they transformed literacy instruction, primarily in their elementary schools, but this was, for all 3 of them, it was a really district-wide transformation in how they approach teaching literacy. And I think it's important to note as we go through this, each district started this process well before the Georgia Literacy Act that was passed in 2023, right? Grady County really began looking into this journey in 2018. Fulton County in 2019, when Superintendent Mike Looney was hired, that was a big thing for him. And in 2020, it was really interesting. Marietta City, they already had an existing pilot program in place in partnership with the Rollins Center that was looking at dyslexia. And so that was already going on as a pilot, but March, April, May of 2020, they were realizing the detrimental impacts pretty early of the pandemic, especially on their more at-risk kids. So they decided to pivot that dyslexia pilot, expand it out, and really make it a whole sort of transforming how they taught literacy in general in Marietta City. And so what's important about this is that all 3 districts, very different in terms of resources, types of students, size, the different kinds of supports that they had, both the availability of different partners, and they all approached this in different ways. They came from different sort of perspectives, but they all have been successful. We've seen significant gains in reading, and even especially amongst the hardest to serve, which is the really important indicator there. And so they're all very promising practices, again, with different approaches. But what we're able to highlight here is that there really were 7 components that were essential for success for all of them, right? And the 7 components that really came out so clearly in all of our interviews and studying with them, one, probably the most important, district leadership, right? The improving literacy instruction was a district-wide priority. It wasn't just, that elementary school is struggling, let's look at what's going on at, Dana Elementary, right? It was a district-wide approach driven from the leadership. And so really looking at effective literacy instruction and making sure that the effectiveness was uniform across the district, no matter what the school looked like. Secondly, high quality training for teachers, coaches, district and school leaders. Most of the staff participated in intensive training in structured literacy. They also ensured educators had the time and tools and resources to complete the training. So it wasn't just a one-time online course and then they went back, right? And related to that, every school had school-based coaches. Districts deployed school-based coaches who provided critical support to teachers as they mastered the new knowledge and applied it in their classroom. And so the teachers were able to practice in the classroom what they were learning, then get feedback from their coaches, then go back and do it again in the classroom. So ongoing coaching throughout the year as they were implementing this. This is key and really important to sustain success. Aligned instructional resources. Also really interesting that all the districts invested in new instructional resources to support the transition, but they also develop, and so the resources that we know, like on the approved list for structured literacy, but they also developed their own sort of locally relevant district resources. So they had both in their toolbox in terms of what materials to use. And then really a big focus on enhanced district capacity to support school staff. So they increased their ability to assist teachers, hiring coaches and other staff with implementing these structured literacy strategies, including adding just educators with literacy expertise in the building as well. And so it was very much, some of the districts even had their local school boards go through the same reading training that the teachers were doing, so the school board understood, what was going on and was able to support. Finally, data-driven instruction, and this back to my mention about how do we evaluate and have some accountability in a good non-federal accountability sort of way about what they're doing. So educators in each district, they were able to use assessment data to monitor the student learning so they could adjust their instruction. Where was it working? Where was it falling short? And also use the data with their own coaches. How did this lesson land so well? Or where can I shore up this lesson? And finally, it's the elephant in the room, but it's true, sufficient funding. The federal pandemic relief funds really enabled districts to implement a very comprehensive reform literacy instruction, a district-wide broad strategy that hit on all of those in a relatively quick manner. So they said without the federal funds, and we're talking, millions and millions of dollars that came in that otherwise would not have been available, that they would have had fewer supports for the teachers and would have taken a lot longer to implement. And so the overall impact would have diminished. If you think about your teacher turnover over time, if you just have enough money to do like school by school, and then a school has 4 new teachers the next year, do you have to go back to that school? And so it's a continual trying to keep up with the changes. And so finally, since you guys are really policymakers in the sense of how do we think about what is needed from the state level? How do we implement these things? What kinds of structures need to support this good work? That I just want to raise up some questions for you all to consider as proposals and things come to you across a lot of these things that could impact how these things are implemented across the state. One is thinking about the leadership in the district. I think as a lot of you know, we have sort of record high superintendent turnover across the state. I think we had like 72 new superintendents this year, one of the highest that we've had. That's a national problem. It's not particular to Georgia, but we have a lot of superintendent turnover. And a lot of new school leaders and new superintendents, they're not trained in systems change. And so we have, in the way we're implementing these new literacy reforms, it is really a systems change process. So we need to think about things like what kind of training and support do school and district leaders need to help shepherd this change? How will the support be provided to them? Is it at the RESAs? Is it at the local district? Is it at the state level? What support structures can be created or what exists to be reinforced to really help consistent district practices be implemented so it's not changing all the time for the schools. Financial resources. The loss of the federal pandemic relief funds really leaves a big financial gap to support this reform and implementations. And so really getting a good handle on what are the resources that are needed, right? We can't just say, oh, they need more money. That's not helpful to anybody. Exactly what for, how will it be used, what's the return on investment, what is a reasonable cost for this, and then what additional resources need to be provided to districts. They can't do this on their own, right? and really thinking about, this is a systemic reform model that these districts are creating. We have some great examples of it being done. How can we scale and spread these learnings? Part of it, that's our job, but part of it also is the community's job. And what's a feasible timeline for this reform? Knowing what resources are available, what's the right expectation of being able to get this done with the time and resources needed for teachers and educators to adjust? Evaluation, I can't stress enough how important it is to have good quality data about what's happening in the schools or on the ground. And so thinking about from a state policy level, what kind of technical assistance can be provided to districts? There are some districts, the bigger one, the Gwinnett's and all of these, they have great evaluation system capacity already. Most of our districts are smaller. They don't have the internal capacity to run evaluation machines. Like, how can we support them in that? And then really thinking about how the state can assess the implementation and impact of these literacy reforms statewide, like a proper program evaluation. Finally, thinking about our educator workforce. We heard a presentation already, but how can really focusing in on teacher and leader retention, right? If you have a new principal or a new superintendent every 2 years, it's very hard to sustain any kind of systematic change. And then finally, another sort of elephant in the room is student poverty. How do the impacts of student poverty impact all of these things? And so while districts have a laser focus on improving literacy, they also have to deal with everything else on their plate, right? And so it can't only be literacy. And so how do we address factors around student poverty to maximize the promise of this structured literacy program? Because we know there are things that work. How do we make sure the population is ready to receive what's working? And so I think that there's a great role and a great opportunity for institutions like the state board to really think about what are those frameworks that we can put in place, not to stifle creativity at the district level, but to support, remove some obstacles, make sure they have what they need, and then let them go forward. So we probably took more time than Stan wanted us to, but I wanted to make sure it was interesting. And we're happy to take questions or step aside and chat later.
Any questions for Dana or Matthew, Matt?
I have a question
Oh, yeah,
on
here we go.
item 8. It goes back to literacy rates among adults.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
I'll be honest with you, I was not familiar with the, by Governor Zell Miller. Is there any data that shows what the low literacy rates were and when it started versus where it is now amongst adults?
Historical low
been
literacy?
successful?
I can't speak to that in
Yeah.
particular, but I do know that we have had a revolution in the number of adults in Georgia that have a high school diploma. At that time, in 1990, when these programs were inaugurated, our high school graduation, or not, excuse me, our high school attainment rates were in the high 70s. Now they're in the high 80s, and so we still have some changes to make. We still have about 1 out of every 10 Georgians that lack a high school diploma. But yeah, I think the larger issue too is when we talk about things like literacy, Mr. Donaldson, what's really interesting is when we look at our adults, I don't have the exact number, but I believe 1/4 of working adults have like a 3rd or 4th grade reading level. And so we can provide you with the actual data, but obviously that's kind of the legacy of not addressing some of these challenges with some of our opportunities around structural literacy at an earlier time in these people's lives.
Thank you.
My son is in Marietta City Elementary School, and I was just bragging to somebody last night about how much progress he's made since he started. I mean, reading, writing, I've really seen this in action. Almost all of these things that you talked about are things I've seen happening at his school, and it's really neat to hear you talk about it. They've been really successful, and it's
Superintendent Rivera is a real visionary, and there's a lot of superintendents across the state that are like him. And so we need to recognize what they're doing and figure out how to share some of these lessons and replicate similar efforts. And the efforts that they're doing around literacy, they can be replicated, not necessarily literacy, right? Like these are just structures and models. If you're looking at math, if you're looking at teacher recruitment and retention, who are the partners at the table? What are the essential elements that need to be there? And it really comes down to commitment, time, and resources. And how does that play out? And are you asking the right questions? Do you have the right partners at the table?
You brought up a good point. Dana mentioned evaluation. One thing that we've been seeing
Yeah,
too,
the data.
there's been a lot of backwards mapping too, where we say, for instance, why is it that this, rural district where they have 80% of students with free or reduced lunch eligibility, why they have 60% of their kids read on grade level, which is 50% higher than the state average. And so also we're trying to figure out where those districts are to actually inductively and organically go in there and say, what are you doing? What is your secret sauce? Why are you performing so much better than one would expect given your underlying data?
Listen, thank you both, first of all, for coming to do this, and I apologize for my statement earlier about this being the high point. I think we love having students in the room, and I know you know that, and you've been with us many times, but I want our board members to keep in mind those implications for policymakers where we talked about, in no particular order, evaluation, teacher workforce, student poverty, those kinds of things. Those are going to be key issues that we're going to be discussing and finding out where we fit in the policy framework. I know that occasionally there's a frustration by us individually and collectively that maybe we don't have the influence that we'd like to have on policy development, because a lot of that starts at the Capitol with the General Assembly. And that's the way the rules of the game are structured right now. But all of us know legislators across the street. And because we're all represented by at least two. And it's incumbent on us to keep the dialogue going with the ones that we do know and expanding our network of people that we can talk to. And also working with the agencies that you've heard mentioned today, not just the governmental ones, the department, the Professional Standards Commission, but also the NGOs, the non-governmental organizations that provide great support, and the partnership is a classic example of that. They've been doing this for 25 years, correct?
The top 10, this is our 21st one, but we were formed in 92, so 30 plus years.
Yeah, 30 plus years. So this is the 21st edition of the top 10.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a widely read and a widely referenced list, and it's very sound. We need to continue to work on this, but back to Melanie's statement last month and also some of the conversations we were having yesterday, we need to stay focused on what our main job is, and that's student achievement. Now, a lot of that has an impact on student achievement. I know that Dr. Rickman worked, and I see Amy Denty joining us online, and Dr. Aldridge is in the room. They're leading our literacy efforts from the department standpoint, and there are literacy specialists that work at the Governor's Office of Student Achievement, at DECAL. There are a lot of people. The collaboration that we're trying to get on literacy is, as Dana said, can be replicated in other content areas. But we also have to be mindful that it's leadership at the local level, and our support for them is really where this hits where the rubber hits the road, as they used to say. So we're going to continue this conversation. I didn't want to wait any later in the session or in the school year to invite them to come in. And I want to thank you for the work that you do, and also the time that you've taken to share with us today. And we'll keep this conversation going.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Following up on the literacy initiative, I do want you to know that there's work going on across the street right now to merge some of the legislation that authorized the work of the Literacy Council. It's House Bill 538, which contains most of the here's what we need to do legislation. And then Senate Bill 211, which is here's who need to be involved legislation. Well, as all of you veteran board members know, there is a dyslexia rule that we implemented in the not too distant past. And those two bills are trying to they're working on reconciling some of the gaps and the overlaps in those bills. So I guess we can call it a cleanup bill is in the hopper, and I think it's going to be heard very quickly, which I hope will clean up some of the gaps in what we did in terms of screening students for dyslexia, also literacy screeners. Those of you that have been around this past year know we spent a lot of time on literacy screeners, and that's gonna continue to be a focus. High-quality instructional materials that the department staff have brought to us. That list is gonna be updated periodically. And they also are working on extending the sunset for the Literacy Council so that their work can continue beyond 2026. Now, that's all in the hopper. There's no action been taken on it. But it's what we've learned from every state that's engaged in this literacy improvement initiative. You will see positive results if we stick to it. But it's a long, hard climb. The states that are showing the greatest improvement have been at this for 10 years. So this is not a quick fix. So we're gonna have to kind of stay the course on this, and our role is gonna be very, very important as we continue to work on that. But as you can see, and you've probably read recently in the news media, we are seeing some early returns in some districts that have really been focused on this even before the literacy bill was dropped and the council was created. So bottom line, we're gonna have to keep after it and keep our eye on the ball as we move forward.
One other point about cleanup bills, which this isn't directly related to education, but it's going to impact us as far as our school systems, and that is the cleanup of House Bill 581, which had to do with the property tax exemptions and the homestead and all that kind of stuff. Many of our school systems are having hearings right now about whether they're gonna opt in or opt out, and so there's a cleanup bill that because of this March 1st deadline could come to fruition, and while it's not directly an education bill, it's gonna impact us as far as our school systems go.
It is, and as many of you have asked me about that, taxation is not our purview.
No.
But we need to be aware of what's going on at the local level. And we also need to be mindful that everybody's lining up on both sides of this issue. And I think you need to talk to the people in your district, the people that are facing this, and ask them the questions that you've asked me. Why are they saying yes or no to the decision? And what's behind that? And what are they looking at in the future? So stay in touch with the district leaders. Some of them are in this room today that maybe are in your district. Ask them that question. But we are going to keep our eye on that. Thank you, Martha. I think it's time now for us to take a look at the agenda. And you do have our full agenda in front of you now. If you don't, please take a second to look at it. Our first order of business will be to approve the agenda, and after you've had a chance to review it, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda that's before you.
So moved.
I'm gonna take Ms. Zoller as a motion and Mr. Donaldson as a second. Any discussion? All in favor of approving the agenda, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, the agenda is approved. Now let's move on to the consent agenda. As you know, we moved several items to the consent agenda at yesterday's committee meetings. So we'll take a minute to look at that list. It's rather extensive. Are there any board members that wish to remove an item from the consent agenda in front of you? Please say so now. If not, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved. Second.
Donaldson and second by Ellis. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The consent agenda is passed. Now, we have the individual items that that have been pulled for a separate vote. Hang on one second. Mr. Benton, we do not have any budget committee items that have been pulled for a separate vote, correct?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Valadares, would you mind walking us through I believe it's 4 items that need to be pulled for a separate vote? Would you take us through those one at a time, please?
Sure, Mr. Chairman. The first item
the State Board Rule 160-5-4-.05 for the regular advance and low wealth funding. It's for the adoption. The second, go ahead.
All right, the State Board Rule 160-5-4.05 has been separated out for a separate vote. I will entertain a motion to approve this rule.
So moved.
Second. Motion by Zoller, second by Donaldson. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of approving this rule, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Next rule, Mr. Valladares.
The second item for the Rules Committee is the adoption of State Board Rule 160-5-4.04, special appropriation for public school capital outlay.
All right, you've heard the motion. I'll entertain a motion to approve this rule.
So moved.
So moved by Ellis, second by Donaldson. Any discussion? All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. Mr. Valladares?
The third item for the Rules Committee is the adoption of State Board Rule 160-5-4.08 regarding school size.
The school size rule. All right, I'll entertain a motion to approve this rule.
Motion. Second.
Motion by Donaldson, second by Ellis. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And finally,
The fourth and last item for the Rules Committee is the adoption of State Board Rule 160-5-1.34, Georgia Special Needs Scholarship Program.
all right, I'll entertain a motion to approve this rule.
So moved.
First motion by Donaldson, second by Fennel. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the motion carries. All right, that takes care of our Rules Committee items. I don't believe we have any separate votes from the District Flexibility and Charter Committee, correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Alrighty. Any executive session items that need to be pulled for a separate vote?
We do. It is recommended the State Board of Education reverse and remand with instructions the decision of the local board in case 2025-10, and I'll make that motion.
Second.
Motion by Donaldson, second by Downey. Any discussion? All in favor? Say aye. Any opposed? Are there any other agenda items for the good of the order that I may have inadvertently skipped over? I think we got them all. Any closing comments that anybody would like to make? Mr. Downey?
Real quick, y'all probably been getting the same emails I've been getting. A lot of us are doing our hearings coming up. We're required, the new board members, we're required by law to have a minimum of one. Sometimes it's good to do more than one. In our congressional district, a public hearing every year. And so I think I've seen a bunch of them coming up in the next few weeks. I know I'm having mine on the 20th of March in Monroe County, down in Forsyth, Georgia. So just want to throw that out there. I know everybody's trying to get them in, and we're trying to avoid spring breaks and testing. That's the biggest thing.
Correct.
I think Frank, where'd Frank?
Frank's had to step out for a
Did
minute.
he have one, or he's about to? I can't remember. I think his is not the same time. But
It's soon, I think.
And I have one coming up in March too.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I'll be having my public hearing in Liberty County on March the 6th. I'm also continuing to stay up to date on House Bill 268. I've talked with the new GEMA director, talked with Chairman Irwin, and also department staff, and just making sure that that school safety bill has all of the components that will, support the work that we're doing here at DOE and also the other organizations that are supporting
All right,
it.
for the benefit, I mean, it takes us a while to get caught up on the bill numbers. Would you tell us what the title of that bill is?
Give you the correct title.
Well, what's the
Yes,
tone?
House
What's
Bill
the tone?
268 is a school safety bill
School
that
safety bill.
engages the Department of Homeland Security and GEMA to create the Office of School Safety Support. And so that work is, again, We're hopeful that it's gonna be done in conjunction with the Georgia Department of Education staff and getting some of that language input into the actual bill.
All right, thank you. And Nick, thank you for continuing to stay involved with that. If you've not been around Nick for a minute, you know he has a lot of expertise in the school safety area because of his professional background, not just as a public safety officer, but as also a local board member. So I think his expertise has been invaluable in the conversation about all this. Anybody else? I want to welcome Courtney to the board. Courtney, I hope this hadn't been too rough on you, but you've already brought a lot and to the meetings. Your background as a teacher is going to be invaluable. Also as a parent, but we also just appreciate your willingness to step in right now and jump in and so welcome, Melanie and Christy. And of course, Jennifer's been with us a little longer, but we're so glad to have the contributions that you're already making and look forward to more of that. Is there anything else for the good of the order? If not, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Mr. Benton, who's second by Ms. Zoller? Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.